thank you both very much, much appreciated. And do pass on our thanks to the staff that work so hard in our beautiful botanic gardens. Could I now move on to the Water Management Zone Committee annual report? So I see that we have been joined by our representatives. First one's the Banks Peninsula Zone Committee. We have Paula Smith and Leslie Woodberg, is it? If I pronounce that correctly.
Sorry, I won't be a moment. I'll just get your presentation ready to go.
No mai haere mai ki te pataka ora ki hautu. It's funny to be back here in this seat. I'm going to talk about the annual report from the Banks Peninsula Water Management Zone Committee. The Banks Peninsula Water Zone Committee is now 5 years old, and I've been chair for 3 weeks. So I'm just going to talk briefly about the committee. In the first couple of years, they were focused on putting together the ZIP, what we call the Zone Implementation Plan. I think you're probably all familiar with the ZIPs. And it had a real focus on the Wairewa catchment, where Te Roto o Wairewa, Lake Forsyth is. And this last year has been a consolidation on that previous work. We had a look through some of the ZIP recommendations. There are 120 in the Banks Peninsula, something like that, a lot, and we've reached a conclusion that perhaps there needs to be a bit of simplifying and streamlining, so that's going to be one of our focuses for the coming year, to review the ZIP and simplify and streamline it. Early this year we've had a bit of a focus on the fires, and the Zone Committee made a decision to allocate $35,000, which was all that it had left in the immediate steps biodiversity fund, to the catchments in Ohinatahi, which are within the Zone Committee. So the boundary of the Zone Committee is actually the top of the Port Hills. So Banks Peninsula includes the Littleton Harbour Whakaraupo catchment, but not the ones on this side, even though they're sort of part of the same landform. And so all that money is going to the restoration of the Summit Roads Ohinatahi Reserve and possibly some other adjacent landowners. What else do I need to say? For Banks Peninsula, our main contaminant is sediment, unlike some other zones where the contaminants of concern are nitrogen, and sediment is associated with phosphorus enrichment as well. The other issue for Banks Peninsula is we get all our water from rain, nearly all of it, whereas in other zones there might be some groundwater sources or other sources. We rely completely on rain, and that makes Banks Peninsula zone particularly vulnerable to the effects of climate change. We've got short, steep catchments and erodible hills. And there's a bit of a myth that the water quality in Banks Peninsula is good and that the ecosystem health is good, but that does not appear to be supported by the data that we're receiving. So that's about it, really. Any questions?
Questions? Yanni.
Thank you. Obviously, the fires has had a major impact on what's going to happen in terms of the waterways. Is the Zone Committee actively involved in that?
In the Banks Peninsula zone, the area affected by fire is not a large area compared to the whole zone. And in fact, there's only one, possibly two catchments that are seriously affected. But the real risk is that with the ground not having 100% vegetation cover, that it starts falling into the creeks. So there are 2 or 3 creeks that drain that area, and they're like most Banks Peninsula creeks. They're small, they've got some native fish living in them, and they're a bit vulnerable.
Can I just add to that? As Paula said, we have all the zone committees have a biodiversity fund, and the Banks Peninsula had 35,000 left for the 2016-17 financial year, and very quickly made the decision to dedicate that to the work, particularly Summit Road Society, but the adjacent landowners to that in terms of revegetation. So, yep.
Glenn?
Sorry, already had a bit to say today. Just one question that stood out there, page 192 it was, over the groundwater takes. Now maybe it's something not to get too excited about, but it's just something that was about the cumulative effect.
It's selling water, isn't it?
I think you're in the wrong zone.
Wrong.
We haven't got any groundwater.
I've grouped the whole lot
Well, we
together.
have got a wee bit,
Don't worry.
but yeah.
Next time.
But there is a bit of an issue with there are water takes from some Banks Peninsula streams, and there's a bit of a question, because you're permitted to take people are permitted to take all the water they need for stock and for drinking. In some cases, because the stream flows vary so much through the season, there's potential for over allocation even within some of our streams, which we have to watch. But there is a little bit of water taken for irrigation and other uses in Banks Peninsula.
Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions? No? But thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I'll take over with Christchurch West Milton, and I'll ask
Same person.
if that's all right. Arapapa Rubin, the chair of Christchurch West Milton, has tangi today, so gives his apologies. So I'll ask Pauline to chip in if she's got anything to add. But just in terms of some of the key milestones for 2016, we did allocate 160,000 to 14 biodiversity projects in that particular zone, and I'll just give a copy of the map of the Christchurch West Milton zone, if you could just give it to the councillors to share around, and it shows where all those projects are across the zone. Just to pick up on the effects of the fire, this particular zone has made the catchments in the upper Heskett affected by the fire a priority for immediate steps funding for the next 2 financial years. So our biodiversity officers from Environment Canterbury are out with reserve staff talking to landowners and seeing if there are any opportunities for that immediate steps funding. In terms of some of the other activities the Zone Committee has been involved in, they identified 4 particular catchments from the data that Christchurch City collects in terms of surface water that were particularly high in various contaminants, and that was Riccarton Cashmere Stream, which was sediment, and also Addington Brook, and as well as Hayton Stream. So we've got a little presentation around Hayton Stream. But just before we get on to that, I'd just like to emphasise that the Zone Committee was very active in doing some work on sediment control on Redmond Spur and trialling some various treatments there that hopefully will be picked up as part of the fire remediation work. And also they've been quite active in working with the University of Canterbury around modelling some urban contaminants. So starting to get a sense of what sorts of stormwater events will end up in, how much copper, how much zinc, how much sediment off various surfaces. So before I hand over to my colleague to talk about Hayton's stream catchment, Pauline, have you got anything you would like to add?
No, I think that's covered it really well, Leslie, and
Thanks for your support at the committee. You're fantastic. We're also using university students out at the Haytons, is that correct?
That's right.
Which are providing a lot of legwork to collect the data. So it's really good to see these partnerships happening. And I noticed a comment on the Banks Peninsula that they were working with Enviro schools as well, which is, it's about just pulling everybody in together on this, isn't it? So, yeah, thank you.
So, Hayton Stream catchment. This is my colleague Nick Moody, who is a pollution prevention officer with Environment Canterbury.
Good morning. I'm just going to test this slide zapper. Where do I point it?
So,
All right, not doing anything here.
so I will just go.
All right.
Yeah, so that's me.
Yep.
No.
All right, I'll just say next
Yeah.
slide there, thanks.
Yep. Just go for it, Nick.
So, good morning. As Leslie said, I'm one of the 2 pollution prevention advisors at ECAN. My name's Nick Moody. All of Christchurch's waterways suffer from urban pollution. However, as there are just 2 of us, we can't work on them all at once. So the Zone Committee has selected 4 priority stream catchments to improve water quality. And as you heard, these are Cashmere Stream, Recordon Stream, Addington Brook, and my catchment, Hayton Stream. Hayton Stream is spring-fed, and together with Curlet Stream, it forms the start of the Heathcote River. Hayton Stream is also the most polluted stream in Christchurch. I've never seen myself anything living in it, though in the past it was so healthy that salmon used to run up the Heathcote River to breathe in the Hayton Stream. As you can see from this map, and perhaps the next map, thanks Leslie, rainwater which falls in its catchment drains the Hornby, Wigram, Sockburn part of town, and there is contamination of that rainwater from a number of sources, including runoff from galvanised zinc roofs and busy roads, as well as pollution from practices at businesses themselves. I'm working on a 5-year project to improve the quality of the stormwater entering Hayton Stream, and doing that in 3 phases. The first phase is identifying high-risk businesses and working with them to ensure that only clean rainwater is leaving their site. The second phase is working with the City Council to address some of the land use pollutants by treating zinc contamination from zinc roofs, sediment from construction sites, and copper and zinc from roads. City Council has recently made a significant investment in this area by approving the upgrade of the Wigram retention basin, which Hayton Stream passes through on its way into Heathcote River, and this will help to remove some of these contaminants, so thank you. Finally, once the water is clean enough for things to live in it, then the third phase will be restoring the stream banks and bed to encourage fish to return to the stream once more. So on the next slide, I'm just going to show you some of the common and easily fixed issues which I see in my work, and I'm working on in this first phase. At the top we've got truck and vehicle washing. Now we've been to Go Bus and they're not discharged into the river, so they're safe. But many places when they wash a vehicle, contaminants leave the vehicle, and also detergents. You can see that next arrow leads to a pipe to the river with detergent coming out. Then you've got the second slide in the bottom left corner, which is a very common one at the moment in our city, which is construction and earthworks, and sediment leaving the site, being tracked out on the truck tyres onto the road, entering the stormwater drain. And on the next slide, you can see that getting entrained in the stormwater and polluting our beautiful rivers. So that's a real issue with the rebuild of the city, of course. And then on the final slide, you can see an example of poor site management leading to industrial pollutants washing into the stream. That's less common, but obviously quite devastating to water quality. So how do we fix it? We're working together collaboratively with businesses to support them to understand the impact that their site management has on the Heathcote River, ensuring the behaviour changes and investments in stormwater management occur on site. And that work is done collaboratively between ECAN, City Council and the University of Canterbury. At the Christchurch City Council, the technical services team in Three Waters and Waste are key to the success of the work. They also have only 2 staff members to go out to all the sites of Christchurch, but I really appreciate their support. And in the Hayden's catchment, they have identified some issues and helped to resolve them. In Hayden's, we work with businesses identified as high risk together, myself looking at the stormwater and the City Council chap ensuring that trade waste is going into the sewer. And under manager at City Council Tim Drennan, that team identified an issue with faulty valves and vehicle wash bays throughout Christchurch and got all those valves removed. And this prevented the discharge of millions of litres of contaminated water into our streams. And many such accidental discharges have been identified by City Council work and stopped in the Hayton stream. So great work is being done there. The University of Canterbury have done excellent research in this space, and as Leslie mentioned, we've sponsored master's students to monitor the stream and look for pollution sources over the last 2 years. For myself at ECAN, my work in Hayden's catchment, finally, there are 327 businesses in the Hayden's catchment, about 80 are high risk, and I'm working with 20 of these, which means that as one person, my books are full. In general, the business's response is positive. I'm seeing some big players investing tens of thousands of dollars in their site infrastructure, as well as in the key area of behaviour change for their staff. So I'm looking forward to continuing to work closely with City Council, Canterbury University and industry, and I'm hopeful that with your support we can improve the water quality of the stream and give the Heathcote River a better start in life. Questions? Thank you, and questions?
Okay, Sarah.
Thank you. And there's obviously an amazing amount of work going on and some really proactive stuff, which is excellent. You mentioned though that you were one of only 2 pollution prevention officers that ECAN has. What is the area? Is that just for the Christchurch city boundaries? Is that for a wider area?
That's for Canterbury.
That's for all of Canterbury, all of the area that ECAN covers, from
we do focus our work on
Kaikoura
the
down
city.
to...
Yes, that's right.
So 2.
Yep. And we do focus our work on the city.
Okay.
And then you've got the 2 people in the City Council team who assist us also Christchurch-wide.
Okay, thank you.
It's all good? Lovely. Thank you very much. Very good presentation.
Thanks, my
And
pleasure.
you're right, we do need to work together on these things. So the next, we've got Ian Whitehouse from Selwyn Waihora Zone Committee and Johannes Welsh.
That's right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, thank you for the opportunity, and apologies from Alan Lim, who's the chair of the Selwyn Waihora Zone Committee, who unfortunately when the meeting got changed has to be an apology. I'm going to be very brief in terms of talking about the annual report, and then Johannes is just going to do a brief commentary on some of our biodiversity projects. I just want to talk about, a couple of key achievements and relate those to, one of the absolutely completely critical issues that I know not only Selwyn Waihora is facing, but many of the other parts, which is the drying up of some of our waterways. I want to focus in terms of one of the key achievements is that there's now actually an operative set of rules, including limits, in place both for water quality and water quantity now that's quite particular to the Selwyn Te Waihora zone. Those include, what many would say, looking across New Zealand, some pretty tough requirements for farmers, including, we believe that at least 900 of them will need a consent to farm by the middle of this year, and as well as that, some, like in the dairy sector, will require to make additional reductions beyond good management practice loss rates, and in the dairy sector that's a 30% reduction beyond that by 2022. One of the key challenges is, we all know, and I guess for the Zone Committee it's really epitomised by the Selwyn River at Coes Ford, is how to get that back so that it's swimmable. So that requires 3 things in combination. You clearly need water. You need water of good quality so that it's swimmable and actually meets the requirements to be swimmable. And as well as that, you need a whole lot of things in terms of, if we call them, that make up the visitor experience in terms of amenity and landscape and the like. And Zone Committee's trying to get people focused on not who's to blame or what's to blame, but what can you actually do about it. I want to link that with one of the, the pieces of the package of actions that the Zone Committee put together from 2011 to 2013, which includes a whole variety of things to try and get more water to stay in the groundwater system and hence into the lowland streams, but also restore a whole lot of flows in other ways. And one of those is the critical importance of Central Plains water, and the key achievements. It talks about the stage 1 impact on how much water has now as a consequence of being able to provide irrigation on stage 1 part of CPW from the Rakaia and from Lake Coleridge in terms of stored water. How that's left a lot more water in the groundwater system. And when stage 2 proceeds, which is still another 15 or so months off, we expect to see more impact on the particular streams that kind of are below Central Plains stage 2, which will include the Selwyn, but there will be a bit of a time about that. The other thing that the Zone Committee is now very, very actively supporting and championing is the proposal that some of Central Plains water from its headrace pipeline would be able to be used adjacent to the Selwyn River, where the pipeline crosses the Selwyn River, to augment flows, well, actually augment the groundwater, and then ultimately the flows in the lowland streams. Before I guess we finish here, I'd just like to thank Anne Galloway, who's I see as an apology here. It's great to have her involved really actively in the Zone Committee. One of the things that she asked for, having listened to Johannes present a half a dozen proposals for immediate steps biodiversity funding, if we could very, very briefly give a snapshot of some of the biodiversity funds in Selwyn Waihora. The Zone Committee has now allocated $600,000 of immediate steps biodiversity funding. So,
Great. Thank you.
Kia ora everyone. This is just a brief snapshot over the past 5-6 years of immediate steps funding for the zone. That map just outlines a number of the projects right across from Te Waihora all the way up to Arthur's Pass. And we spend, as Ian just said, almost over $600,000 on just under 50 projects with real action on the ground, particularly focusing on wetlands, springheads, hill and high country catchments and lowland streams, which pretty much describe the whole zone as it is. And the majority of projects had high or very high ecological assessment scores, but we also had around 30% are in the low bracket, which equally is representative of the zone, because we have a very depleted biodiversity across the lowland plains. In a recent Zone Committee meeting, 4 priority zone or areas were decided by the Zone Committee for my work, which focus on the high country, the Hororata catchment, the area around Coast Ford, particularly around Silver Stream, and generally high biodiversity values. In addition to that, the Zone Committee has now also made the conscious decision to support Port Hill fire restoration efforts wherever we find opportunities in the zone to actually help landowners with the restoration effort. And what does it mean, or what are those biodiversity projects we've been up to over the last couple of years? Those amongst you who are active recreationists, maybe fishermen, would probably know One Tree Swamp up on Mount White Station. We do a lot of work around wetlands, such as on the left-hand side, or linking beach forest remnants in the foothills with the big riparian corridor with the lowland plains, wetlands and springheads further down. A lot of the work goes on around springhead enhancements and just riparian areas, both in private public land on farms and lifestyle blocks. There's quite a concerted interest from landowners to work on their riparian margins and work around sites that have high mahingakai values, all the way down to now sites where we support Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust with covenant work they're doing to work towards this mountain to the sea transect, whether it's from the Southern Alps in Arthur's Pass to Te Wahora, or whether it's from the Banks Peninsula side of things towards Te Wahora. Thank you very much.
Fantastic.
Questions?
Questions? Do we have any questions? Glenn, Vicky, and Phil.
Thank you. Now I've got the zone right. Just that question over the groundwater take on page 192 and the connection with the previous or the introductory remarks over key achievements in 2016. So is that the connection? There's been that reduction through CPW and the comment there over the combined impact of the 1,700 groundwater takes in the zone, is that prior to this reduced take from CPW? Or no link?
I mean, let's step back and give, I guess, the bigger content. So there's 1,780 odd groundwater takes across the whole Selwyn Te Wahora area, so the piece that drains into the lake and adjacent areas. So stage one of Central Plains only covers a relatively small part of the plains, and so what we're seeing there is clearly an important element of, I mean, ultimately what will be a medium to longer term a readdressing of the cumulative impact of all of those 1,700 takes.
Okay. Oh, yeah. And have you got a handle on what proportion the CPW project is of those? Just a
so off the top of my head, I can't give you a number, but it would be less than 100.
Okay, thanks.
Vicky?
Are you guys familiar with the recent Vivid Economics report on what has to happen in New Zealand in order to meet our Paris climate change targets?
So I don't know the details.
So one of the things that came through very, very strongly in that was that even if we electrify our transport system, make our houses energy efficient and our buildings, was that land use needed to change quite dramatically, and the number of cows and the number of sheep needed to decline quite dramatically within a reasonably short period of time. So I'm wondering if that sort of research is feeding into any of the work that you guys are able to influence ECAN with.
I guess I'm not really able to comment in particular detail about how that report is being given effect to at this point in time.
But it's one zone committee and they're joint committees with ECAN, so I think it's probably something that we need to raise with ECAN councillors.
Yep.
Thank you. Phil?
So, look, thank you, and thank you for your report too. The section you've headed restoration of lowland streams, and you've got reference to the, call it TSA, targeted stream augmentation. Just wondering about that and just how that process will work. Like, you're indicating really that it's in an experimentation stage, so I'm just really wondering about the science, how sound that is in terms of where the water will eventually go and the impact on aquifers.
So there's, I guess, the bigger scale, which is, I mean, they're all basically augmentations. So, bigger scale, like what we kind of would hope the proposal to use Central Plains head pipe race. The area that I guess is described here is much more local to give, I guess, where you've got high value local waterways, particularly the Irwell, but also some, Irwell's very, very significant to Ngaitahu. It used to be their main passageway kind of up the plains. So to give effect to local precious waterways that I guess we've seen the amount of water decline. Some of those are clearly substantial mudfish habitats. And so those are local using, we've currently piloted using water from either the end of stockwater races, or I think one of the ones that's also described using a solar pump to pump from groundwater. So quite local and relatively small scale to give, local values back into smaller waterways, which
So
would
they're
have been
not-
smaller
they're not
waterways
deep
anyway.
bores and right, they're not deep bores right from the...
So that they'll be relatively local groundwater takes in terms of being able to drive them from with solar power.
Okay.
So it's more looking at what can we do to help the waterways rather than the bigger getting more water into the groundwater system itself. So that's the prohibiting new water takes. That's making transfers incredibly unattractive. That's the replacement of a reasonable of 30,000 hectares of currently groundwater irrigated lands with water from CPW from the Rakaia and College. But those are the bigger pictures that keep more water in the groundwater system.
Thank you.
Dion?
Just a very quick one, just very coming off what Phil was talking about. 1,700 groundwater takes, and also you talk about the change in weather patterns. Where does the water, where does it actually come from? Is it from the west coast and the rain coming over, or is it actually from the east coast rain?
Here in terms of the groundwater system, you're talking about the rain on the plains. So anything on the plains, so it's generally the northwest rain doesn't come that far, so you're talking about any weather systems that will produce rain on the plains. So you, as a resident of Christchurch, you'll be pretty familiar with those weather systems.
Yeah, so obviously the rain that from those nor'westers, when it dumps on the hills and fills up the Waimak River and the Rakaia River, does that replenish the groundwater here?
So in terms of the upper and middle part of the plains, I think the short answer is probably not to a great impact, but as you get further down, and I think few people are familiar with where Christchurch City's water comes from, you'll know that the Waimakariri, flowing through its old now buried channels, because it used to ultimately for a while was discharging through Te Waihora, where Te Waihora now is. So through there you are getting water coming into particularly the lower groundwater system from the Waimakariri, and you see the similar thing happening in the Rakaia. So yes it is. What Central Plains Water is doing is it's using water that is generated by those northwest rains to then replace some of the groundwater takes in the middle and upper part of the plains.
So a big problem is obviously then, from what you're saying, is actually the groundwater takes.
So the situation that we're seeing now is a combination of 3 years of certainly quite less than average amount of rainfall onto the plains to recharge the groundwater system, combined with that cumulative impact of a large number of groundwater takes.
Cool, thank you.
Yanni?
Just a quick question in regards to the nitrogen levels. I just know, and you've got talk about the CWMS targets. Can you just give us a quick understanding of what's happening with the nitrogen targets, particularly with CPW Stage 1 coming online?
So let me, I guess, step up into some context for, let's call them nitrogen loads and load limits. So the operative plan does have a nitrogen load limit for farming from the Sel and Te Waihora area of, I think off the top of my head, it's 4,800 tonnes per year. What the lake currently sees is, I think off the top of my head, is about 4,100. If anyone wants to detail this, there's an agenda paper on the Sel and Waihora Zone Committee meeting on Tuesday that spells all these out. So the lake is currently seeing a lot less because of the impact of the lag. So in terms of a molecule of nitrate, once it's lost below the soil layer in the top of the plains, takes anywhere between 10 and 30 years to get to the lake. So when we look at and model the nitrogen losses from the current land use, from current farming. It's quite a lot bigger number than what we're currently seeing. One of the real world challenges for the zone committee, and indeed for anyone involved in the process of trying to come up with a solution package, was the reality that by the time they kind of had a chance to create this package of solutions, Central Plains Water had already been consented. So Central Plains Water applied for their consent during the gold rush period of water takes, back in 2002 or 2005, but it was only in 2012 that it finally went through all of the Environment Court and High Court processes. So that was a challenge as well. So you had to kind of somehow accommodate the fact that CPW was consented and adds to the load. And so basically then, as a consequence, in the operative plan, there's a specific load that's been given to Central Plains Water for their conversion of the dry land, and then as well as that, the load limit takes account of the current land use and the lag effect on that. And then, as I said in the key achievements, one of the things is it also, though, takes account of the further reductions of those with the highest losses a need to make by 2022, and ends up with 4,800.
It's getting better.
I'm sorry.
So the challenge with because you've got a lag, things will get worse before they get better. That's the reality that's the biophysical reality.
How much is?
I can't off the top of my head do my percentages. Look at the zone committee paper in terms of the amount that's estimated is currently going in currently in the lake is seeing, and what the current land use is giving you.
I'd love to. Do we get that?
I don't know.
Okay, so it's
Yep.
Tuesday coming.
No, it's been. Yep.
It should be on the hub.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Look,
Sorry, Lynn.
no, don't apologise. It is really important, and it's important that we hear from all the zone committees the way that we have done. It's not a process that we've had in place right from the get-go, so it's a great improvement to be able to have these conversations on a regular basis. So thank you very much for making the effort to come. And would you like to move, Pauline, that the reports be received? Do I have a seconder for that? Phil? I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And could I